Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Coast Guard Academy Admissions Partner webinar installment on the Coast Guard Academy application for the 2018 and 2019 recruiting cycle. So that's this coming cycle. The application unofficially went online August 1st. The first notification for which will go out to all students on August 6th, today. So all students around the country and around the world who are interested in applying to the Coast Guard Academy were notified that the application launched today. So if you're working with any applicants out there and they were like, well, I haven't really heard anything, check with them again. By now, they should have received some sort of correspondence. And make sure that they're checking the email that they created their account under. If their parents created the account, or if they created an account under an email address that's no longer in use, they're going to want to make sure that they have the accurate email address that's connected to the right account. A lot of times we get confused applicants who try to log into an account, and they may have 2 or 3 accounts, not knowing that they have 2 or 3 email addresses all connected to us. So we're responding to all sorts of different email addresses that they are not aware of. So with that in mind, let's get started. So I'm going to start off with some basic eligibility requirements and things to expect as far as averages on the application, dates and deadlines, the typical admissions spiel here. For eligibility, must be a U.S. citizen, unmarried, no dependents, 17, 22 years of age by July 1 of entry year. That has not changed. And then must be a high school graduate or have GED equivalent. We do have college students apply. We do have students who have earned their associate's degree and their undergraduate degrees apply. We do have students with those backgrounds who actually get accepted as well. So all different types of backgrounds get in, but must have that high school graduation or GED recipient. And then if you're not a U.S. citizen, they may want to consider applying under those international cadet programs. Those will be accessed through their embassy or the U.S. embassy in their country. The Coast Guard and Coast Guard Academy work together to coordinate as far as what countries we're looking at getting students from, and we typically get around 15 to 20 applications a year for that program. This year, I believe we received 2 dozen, and we accepted 11 people. So that's 10 people that came into the class that will graduate with the class of 2022. And then we had 1 international student from Chile who actually just showed up today. And she will be staying for only 1 semester. It's part of a semester exchange program. So we had a cadet actually go down to Chile to experience a semester there. It's a really wonderful opportunity. I'm very happy that we were able to offer that. So if they are an international student, they're going to want to contact their embassy about additional information, and all academies have something similar. The admissions requirements, not much has changed here. We still require forms such as their high school transcript, letters of recommendation from math, English, guidance counselor, and then that physical fitness exam, official SAT scores. We need that DODMER medical exam, and then supplemental forms if they are currently serving in the military or are a reservist. We ask for a commanding officer recommendation or an OINC recommendation. If they are a college student, we request that they get us a college transcript, including dual enrolled students and students who are taking college level courses while in high school. Resumes are also optional. It's a good use for blank space in the application. It's a good use to kind of consolidate things. But I have seen good resumes that add value to the application, and I've seen poorly written resumes that really detract from the application. And what a student needs to be mindful of is if they are including a resume, 5, 6, 7, 10 pages of a resume is not the way to go about it. It's to maybe embellish a little bit or expand upon something that they were able to do that really contributed to leadership development or academic growth. Those are good uses of the resume process. Really, we've seen them all over the spectrum help in one way or another or hurt in one way or another. And then up to 2 extra letters of recommendation. So this is when the student says, hey, can my congressman, can my senator write me a letter of recommendation? Can my scoutmaster provide something? Yes, absolutely. We accept 2 letters of recommendation extra in addition to the math, English, guidance counselor, and physical fitness exam administrator. If they are going to a congressional office to ask about a letter of recommendation, what I recommend they do is only really ask for that letter if that congressman or senator or politician, whoever may be, really knows them. If they're just a constituent in their district or in their state, that letter may not carry as much weight, and it also may not really add value to the application, considering we do not have a nomination process. And we select students on a holistic review. Now, if you grew up across the street from that senator and they raised you and they saw you grow up and develop and saw your character develop and your leadership style develop, that person may then be able to contribute some significant input into your application, and that'd be fantastic to include. The application basics, it is again 100% online. So if you are a student watching this video, which is absolutely fine, please be mindful that we need everything submitted electronically, and everything that needs to be submitted can be submitted through those various links or emails that go out from your application. So everything can be submitted online. If you are unsure of how to submit something, you can also scan it and email it to admissions@uscga.edu. Fax and snail mail, while we can do it, we really would like to shy away from you pursuing those options for submission. So please absolutely send those files. You can, if there's any concern about personal information, you are welcome to encrypt them. You can password protect them. You can send them in a password protected zip file. Get those to our office electronically. All those letters of recommendation, those can also be submitted through various means using the online method. When you hit submit on the request, an email shows up in the inbox of that teacher. And I'll get into that in a little bit as well. Our average incoming GPA is between 3.0 and 4.0. So 3.0 and above are a good competitive range for scores for GPA on a 4.0 scale. We convert all scales to an unweighted GPA. Average SAT, ACT math scores or combined scores, 1,200 combined or 28 on the ACT. So math score would be about a 600 and up from there. Looking at those STEM courses for classes in chemistry, physics, calculus, and I put these in order of precedence if you weren't catching on to that. So, for order of precedence, you want to focus mainly on the academics first and foremost. After that academic component, you then want to look at the leadership component. If their leadership component is lacking, the student has to ask themselves, how can I improve upon that leadership component? Last but not least, extracurricular activities, essays, writing their own essay in their own voice. We want them to answer the question as they would answer it. There's not many opportunities for us to kind of interact with these students. So if they answer it the way we think we want it to sound, or they answer it the way their parents would want it to sound, that's not really a true interpretation of the student's response to that question. So please make sure that those students are staying true to themselves in that essay form. For letters of recommendation, we already touched on. That average PFE, physical fitness exam, is about 200 or above, is a good competitive range. So if they're coming in 165, 180, 190, really pushing above that 200 range is a good rule to follow. The reason being, we see a decline in many of those scores as they come here to the academy. We ask that a PE instructor or a JRTC instructor administer those PFE exams, and oftentimes they're not administered exactly correct, although the instruction manual and audio for the push-ups is all online. So if they're not administered correctly, then there's a chance that the student may have scored points or run something like less than 1.5 miles, or maybe forgot to do the cadence part of the push-ups and just did as many push-ups as they could do in 2 minutes. And that's different from what they're going to experience here. So they may see a score drop. The student should know that leaving SWAB Summer, or completing SWAB Summer, I should say, completing it, they need 165 out of 300 points. It's a pretty low score. I can do that. I'm still commissionable over 200 points. I can do that. So if I can do it, a 16, 17-year-old can do it, no problem. So those dates again, online right now, went online August 1st. Our early action will be October 15th. And regular action or regular admissions deadline will be January 4th, and the national acceptance deadline is May 1st. You'll see another slide in a little bit with some more detail on those dates and deadlines. And then again, no nomination required. So this is a merit-based application. It's based on who you are and a holistic review of that application, what you bring to the table, what you can offer, and how you enrich and better and strengthen the Coast Guard and the service in our academy. That's what we're looking for, so keep that in mind. Accessing that application, where do I find it? Students can go online, uscga.edu/apply. That is the easiest, most direct way. If they already have an account with us, they're going to want to access their Bears Den account. They can also get it through the admissions website. The Bears Den account is found on the main website or any website that we have uscga.edu attached to. And they click on the little 3 horizontal bars. They're going to see Bears Den login right there in the center. Click that, log on in, access their application. And then there's 2 different checklists that they'll be following. Read the manual. Please, if you read the applicant handbook and the student reads the applicant handbook, everyone will be on the same page as what to expect as far as submitted, received, and processed materials. The checklist in the application may show what a student has already submitted as far as they hit submit on the high school transcript, or they requested the letters of recommendation, or they submitted their essays. But the checklist in their Bears Den account may show that it's been received and processed. They're going to update at different intervals. So if a student says, I'm a little concerned, I've got checklists in one, I've got check marks in one checklist and no check marks in another, it's because we're in the process of receiving those materials, looking at them. For instance, if a student submits the resume, we need to open it and see that, yes, that is your resume. It's not like a picture of your cat or your dog. And then we can add it to your application, mark it as resume, and then review it later on in the application process. So again, review that applicant handbook. For our admissions partners, I am in the process of getting it updated as of today. I just returned from leave, so I'm getting that added to the content in your Bears Den account. So if you're an admissions partner, go to the document section and you will be able to find that applicant handbook, and I will try to have that online tomorrow as of August 7th, 2018. So again, those important dates and deadlines: October 15th, early action deadline. If a student is 100% ready to submit their application, that is their best foot forward, that is the absolute best that they can do as an applicant, they are ready to be reviewed the very next day, then early action may be the deadline for them. And those are typically our strongest applicants. By January 15th, we will have all early action decisions released, which is different than years past, and I'll go into those differences in a little bit. January 4th, regular admissions deadline. These are deadlines. If they don't hit them, then unfortunately they will not be reviewed for the class of 2023. And if they would like to apply again, they're welcome to do so for the class of 2024. All materials for those deadlines must be submitted by January 15th. Interview season ends for us on January 30th, so we will stop accepting interviews after the 30th of January. We will attempt or find ways to interview folks if needed, if it is an absolute necessity, but for all intents and purposes, January 30th is the end of our interview season. By April 1st, regular admission decisions will be released. By April 15th, that's the DODMER medical exam. That will be that deadline, April 15th. May 1st, appointment acceptance deadline. That's national acceptance deadline, typically May 1st around the country. And then May 15th, those medical exam qualifications must be met, or the waiver deadline must be met. So the earlier that an applicant can get their DODMER started, meaning their application must be complete and ready for review, then we can start the DODMER process. Then the earlier they can get in there, get reviewed, it shows a lot of things. It shows initiative, a drive, interest, and then if there are any problems, we can get them through the waiver process earlier on. As far as our enrollment paperwork due, that's all due by June 1st. And then SWAB summer starts the last Monday of June. So typically the Monday before your first week of July, that's when it will start. I've seen last Monday of June. I've also seen July 1st, so stand by on that. But as far as we know right now, last Monday of June is the date. The decisions that students will receive are the following. They're either going to receive an appoint, which will be a conditional or full appointment to the Coast Guard Academy class of 2023. Conditional appointments meaning that they're missing some sort of medical requirement or some sort of other piece of their application to complete that applicant and convert them to a full appointment. In most cases, 9 out of 10, it is waiting on a medical case. So it's waiting on a DOMERB exam to finish or waiting on a waiver process to complete. They could also be not appointed to the academy and receive a do not appoint message, in which case their application kind of is dead in the water at that point, and they'll be looking forward to that class of 2024 application and finding ways to strengthen their application. If they receive that decision, what I'll ask is that they wait till the end of the admissions cycle to contact their admissions officers. Those AOs are rather busy. They have a lot of folks coming in and asking them those questions. So we want to give full attention to all the applicants still in the application process and can turn our attention towards those students wanting to know how to strengthen their application once the process is complete. Coast Guard Academy Scholars is another decision they can earn. Down there at the bottom is kind of some of the numbers that you'll see. And then new to this year, and I'll talk again on this change, there is a reevaluation option for early action applicants as well. Early action will receive about 800 or so applications, and that comprises or makes up about 45% of the incoming class. So out of those 800 applications, we may fill, if we have an incoming class of around 300 or so, we may fill around 130 to 140 of those spots. So 45% of the incoming class will be from that early action group. Regular admissions will review about a little over 1,200 applications, closer to around 1,300 in some cases, and that makes up the rest of the class at another 55%. And then 700 students will be reviewed for prep school, and those go into around 60 or 70 spots for the prep school program. So, if the application rate or the acceptance rate to the academy is around 15 to 20%, then the acceptance rate to prep school is around 10%. All right, so let's get into some of those changes that you may be seeing in this new application cycle. So the first one would be that date and deadline. The final application deadline for regular admissions is January 4th. You may see January 15th, but that is the final for receiving all their materials. So this is the final to hit submit on the application. This will be midnight on January 4th, so before the clock rolls over to January 5th. So 11:59 p.m. on January 4th. And I would say to a student, if you're waiting until that time, you may be a little late in the application process. We want to hit those submit buttons a little earlier on, give ourselves time to update our applications, ask questions, talk to our admissions officers. But that is a new date or new deadline for this year's application. The interview process will be a little new this year. The Coast Guard Academy admissions will identify applicants to interview if amplifying information is needed to make an admissions decision. So not all appointed applicants will be interviewed. Not all students who get interviewed will be appointed to the academy. Not all students who don't receive interviews will not be appointed to the academy. So that is something to consider as far as those students looking at the interview process for the Coast Guard Academy. The Smiths just asked, as far as the deadline, is it Eastern Standard Time? We actually are very generous and we extend the deadline all the way out, essentially around all the way out to our Hawaiian Pacific time frame. So it's likely that the application will stay open through the next day. What I'll say for students watching this is it's better not to risk it. So if the application says, to submit by that date or by that deadline, I would just go by your time zone and I would submit, a day early. It doesn't hurt anything. You can still update your application if need be. And it ensures that your application is in on time. And if you're joining the Coast Guard, early is on time, trust me. So for the interview process, we're going to be selecting those students. This last year, we were able to conduct about 450 optional student interviews. This year, that benchmark may be increased. So we're going to be out, looking at student applicants And those who do need amplifying information on the application will be requesting an interview from. If you don't hear from the Coast Guard Academy regarding an interview, don't fear, don't lose hope. It doesn't mean that you're not be in the running for or in any consideration for the Academy. It just means that we may not need any amplifying information to make a decision. So stand by for further information. This year for interviews as well, we have two admissions interview partner coordinators. It's going to be Mr. Walt Hansen again in Tennessee, and then Miss Paula Smith in Anchorage, Alaska. They are going to split the country in half for coordinating efforts. Ms. Smith is going to take everything west of the Mississippi River, and Mr. Hansen is going to take everything east of the Mississippi River. The state coordinators in those states will know who their person is to kind of go to for any questions regarding interviews. And we will be using the entire interview pool or the entire partner pool to help conduct also Skype and phone interviews. So in order of precedence, we prefer face-to-face. And if you're unable to do face-to-face, then Skype would be your next best option. And if you're unable to do that, then phone interview will be the last option. The last major update for interviews is that the online interview form will look a little bit different this year. We do require 5 mandatory questions to be answered and provide those responses in the online form. And then there is still an open commentary block, so you can write, just like you have in the past, any additional commentary you wish on the student to help strengthen their application. But I will say is make sure that it's an interview that adds value to the application and doesn't necessarily just repeat the application. That would be the most beneficial thing for the applicant. All right, decision releases. These will vary a little bit this year as well. The admissions team will release most admissions decisions closer to those notification deadlines for each action group, meaning regular or early action or regular admissions. And this is in order to better shape the incoming class. So what this means for our volunteers or for our partners is you may be used to seeing multiple waves of decisions being released, and you may see fewer of those this year. So you may only see maybe 2 rather than 5 or 6. So just be patient with us. Our office is formulating and making sure that we are making the correct decisions that best benefit the student, the Coast Guard, the class of 2023. And those decisions will be released, and we'll make sure to post those decisions online when we are ready to release them and start contacting students to congratulate them. So if there are any questions on that as well, feel free to type those into the thought bubble, and we can answer those in a little bit. Another new process this year is the reevaluation decision. In the reevaluation decision, what that means is that approximately 75 to 100 early action applicants who are not selected for an appointment will be offered the opportunity to be reevaluated during the regular admissions process. So while many of the students who are reviewed in early action get placed on the wait list, this allows for about 10% or so of that early action group to, instead of getting put in the waitlist pool and getting reviewed amongst the other waitlist candidates, to be moved into the regular admissions pool for review. So what this requires is that the student provides us their fall grades by February 1st of their incoming year, so February 1st, 2019. And I think this is a great step for the application. I think it's going to allow some students who may have hit the button a little early for that early action review to go back, strengthen their application. And while all those other students on the waitlist pool are also doing the same exact thing, they're providing us updates and trying to strengthen their application for a review. And Mr. Gonzalez, I see your question there. I'll get to that in exactly a minute. All right, this is one of our last slides as far as applicant hints. What I recommend you express to applicants is that they use their blank space. Their blank space on the application, meaning, for instance, the 6 blocks for extracurricular activities, and that they fill out meaningful meat and potato activities that really enrich and add value and competitiveness to their application. and that they use the awards, achievements, details section of each of those blocks to say a little something about what they did in that activity. You'd be amazed at how many times, for instance, someone who says, I play a musical instrument, or I'm in the band, and then they never list like what instrument they play, or if they're in choir, they never say what they sing, or if they are an athlete, they don't say what position they play, or kind of what achievements they've accomplished, or what leadership they've accomplished in an organization. So use the blank space wisely, and a student will find that if they use the blank space wisely, they won't have to really include the resume optional upload. It'll all be right there in the application, even up and through the essays. So use your blank space. Know your admissions officers. So those admissions officers are your advocates and the advocates for the students. So make sure that they get in touch with the admissions officer, make an introduction. I would always prefer a phone call followed by an email. And then once you've met your admissions officer and you know who they are, once you submit your application, provide monthly updates to the office. So weekly updates are too much. There's way too many too much email traffic. So weekly is too much. Every other week is too much. Monthly is perfect, and then every other month is not enough, because if you're providing every other month, we might forget who you are exactly until we bring up your application again and look at it. So healthy milestone achievements provided in monthly updates. Don't make it too long, don't make it too short. Just shows that interest, stays engaged. Make sure that we know you're still on board with the Coast Guard Academy. For students and really for admissions partners, come and visit campus or attend any local events. So we want students to show their interest, to show their engagement, to show how excited they are to be here at Coast Guard. And one way to do so is to show up at events. If they are saying in their essays that this has been their lifelong dream, and they live right down the road in Waterford, Connecticut, and yet they've never made a visit to the Coast Guard Academy, it seems a little bit suspicious. So make sure that the student is trying to attend a campus visit, or trying to at least attend some sort of local event or event near them, or at the very least reach out to Coast Guard members, or reach out to their admissions officer to find ways in which they can get better involved, such as like the Coast Guard Auxiliary. The student should be the one driving this whole process and owning the admissions process. At the end of the day, it's the applicant's decision. I think many of the admissions volunteers would agree with me that it's not going to be mom and dad going through swab summer or boot camp. So the student really needs to own the process here. I see that we're at 4:30. I've got a couple more lines here, and then we'll roll right into Q&A. The students should be reminded to engage with their teachers and their guidance counselors and to follow up. Just because they hit request on the letter recommendation button doesn't mean that the professor or the teacher or the guidance counselor or PFE administrator gets that request. It may have been trapped in some sort of spam folder. Or if they do get the request, it might not mean that they understand who it's for or why it's coming to them. So please ensure that that student is following up with their teachers at their schools. It's amazing how many times a student calls up and says, why wasn't I reviewed? And we say, well, you were missing all your letters of recommendation. They say, well, I submitted those requests. We ask them if they ever talked to their teachers about them, and they say no. So it's really the student's ownership. They need to go and follow up with those teachers. For homeschooled and non-traditional schooling students, there are little hints and tricks of the trade as far as how to make themselves more competitive, or kind of put themselves on the same plane as applicants from traditional school backgrounds in the applicant handbook. So for those students, get into the applicant handbook, read a little bit, do a little research, find out what they can do to best prepare themselves for the process. And then lastly, finish strong. And that's strong both academically, don't fall into the senior slump. That's strong morally, don't get into trouble. That's strong physically. So, run, you have to stay up with your cardio, do your push-ups and sit-ups, and make sure that you're ready for swab summer. And that's all I have for this evening. So thank you so much for staying with me there. I know we started a couple minutes late. Seems like we finished right around the time that we wanted to. What I will do is start scrolling through some of these questions. So at this time, I'll take any questions that you may have about the application, about this year's any new process with this year. Please, anything is game. I will do my best to answer it. And if I am unable to answer it, what I'll ask is you provide me an email follow-up, and we'll make sure to get your question answered by the correct person. So with that, we'll start with Mr. Gonzalez here. And Mr. Gonzalez asks, if current college students are applying, do they need to wait for their fall semester grades to come out, or can they still apply for early action? It's a great question. So as far as the early action regular admissions for college students, if they are a first-time applicant college student and they're a college freshman, first-time applicant to the Coast Guard Academy, they can apply early action. If they are a second-time or third-time or fourth-time applicant and are a college student, we will require those fall semester grades at least, if not their entire college transcript, in order to complete their academy application. So they would need to wait until regular admissions before being reviewed for the admissions process here at Coast Guard. Great question. Thank you very much. Homeschooled students, are they as strong as traditional candidates? I would say it varies. We have some homeschooled students who are absolute rock stars and come here and blow it out of the water. We have other homeschool students who struggle at first and then pick up steam, and other homeschool students who wash out like other students do who attend traditional backgrounds here at the Academy. So it really depends on the student's preparation. So what are they doing to kind of get into those leadership roles outside of their home? What are they doing to kind of socialize as far as team skills, leadership skills, their academic preparation? Are they attending classes at their local college or university? Are they prepared for that academic rigor and the pace of learning? It's a bit of a different lifestyle here as far as the requirement for your time. So time management is a big piece of it. But I would say overall, the attrition rate for both homeschooled students and traditional students are about the same. All right. Another question here, as to SAT, ACT scores, why is the writing test only optional? So that's actually a great question for our operations branch, or actually our director of admissions. Being that we are a primarily STEM school, or a science, technology, engineering, and math school, we like to focus on those components of the application. We also would like to avoid putting more obstacles in the way of applicants to apply to the Coast Guard Academy. So having a writing optional portion to the test kind of alleviates one of those obstacles that some students may find when going through their application process. So for the most part, we get a very high caliber, high quality student applying here with or without a writing portion of their test. We still pay attention to the scores that they get, but for the most part, math, sciences reign supreme in the application and throughout their time here as a cadet. All right. This Miss asks, what happens if a candidate does not make the June 1st deadline for the materials submission? So if they don't make the materials submission deadline and June 1st, I'm assuming you're thinking materials after being accepted to the Academy. So the student's been fully appointed to the Academy, they received their appointment package, there's materials in that package to submit back to us by June 1st. I have seen appointed students submit materials rather late in the application or in the registration process up into swearing-in day. Now that's obviously not preferred. We want students to finish those things nice and early and to be ready to go on swab summer. If the earlier they can submit them, it also allows for any cushion or buffer if there was something missing or something that was inaccurate or wrong. So we will work with candidates on a case-by-case basis, but do prefer that all candidates meet that June 1st deadline if they are selected and appointed to the Coast Guard Academy and plan on showing up on swearing-in day. All right, Ms. Wright asked, what is the advantage of early action over regular admissions? So like I briefly stated earlier, those early action applicants, really the only advantage for them is that they are going to find out earlier on an admissions decision, and then either they're going to be able to accept that admissions decision if it's an appointment, or turn their efforts towards somewhere else as far as putting their full resources towards their next best or plan B option. The other thing may be if they're placed on the wait list, like many applicants are out of early action, they're then able to work on strengthening the application and competing their way off the wait list into the class. So Most students who apply early know that they are 100% ready. They're a rock star candidate. There's nothing standing in their way of getting into the academy. They want to put forth their best foot, and they're ready to do so right then and there. So for a lot of students who know that that's going to be their number one pick, it's a way of getting that decision to them early so they can then start all the other processes to get them ready for swearing-in day. If there are any other questions, and while we're waiting on any additional ones, on the questions page here, you'll see the Associate Director for Operations, Mr. Chris McMunn, Lieutenant Brendan Doherty, who is actually a Merchant Marine Academy graduate, now working Assistant Director of Operations back there with Mr. McMunn, and then Shannon Castanera, who was a prior HS Coast Guard retired, and now working as our DOMERB liaison and our medical waiver officer. So if you have any questions regarding the application process, processing materials, processing appointments, the international cadet program, all of those will be handled by these three individuals, and they are happy to address your questions at any time. Any other questions before we hang up? We have multiple partners participate in each individual interview. So that's not typically something we see. And if you're a first-time interviewer and you're a little uncomfortable interviewing an applicant alone, you're welcome to ask for assistance. Some interviewers, like couples, I think, for instance, the Smiths, I know David and Carlene here online, I know they've interviewed candidates together, same with the Mundies in New York. But as far as most interviews are a one-on-one interaction, it depends on your personality. Maybe whoever you're interviewing with may depend on their personality. If you work well together, it might work out very well. If not, then you may want to consider adjusting your strategy for that interview. So that's completely up to you, as long as we get one interview evaluation out of the report. And as long as it's completed on time, then I will leave up the rest to the admissions partner as far as how flexible they want to be. If a candidate requests early action, but their application is not completed by the deadline. So if a student checks the early action box, which is in their application and is the only box that needs to be checked in order to be reviewed for early action, and then they don't complete their application by the time that deadline comes around, what will happen is they'll automatically regress into the regular admissions pool. So they won't be reviewed for regular action. They'll go to early action. They'll have multiple correspondence from us trying to get them ready for early action. But if they don't make it, we'll review them after the regular admissions deadline. Wonderful. Well, that seems to be all the questions we have today. We might have one more. What feedback, if any, do we give to candidates after the interview? So right then and there on the spot, you're welcome to give the student feedback. As far as their interview evaluation itself, that is a document protected under a hiring document for a federal agency, so they can certainly request those, which will go through our legal department using a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request. But you as the interviewer can give them on-the-spot feedback. We are in the process of getting a admissions partner feedback form from students who are interviewed and have been appointed to the academy to get feedback to the interviewer from the interviewee. And I will always provide feedback to the interviewer as well, every interview I receive. So yeah, the feedback to the applicant really would come right then and there, or at any time from the person conducting the interview. But as soon as it translates into that report, it will be protected in their application. Well, thank you again, everybody, for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed this Academy webinar, helping to get folks updated and informed on the new admissions process for our application 2018-2019. If you have any follow-up questions, concerns, or if you want some other ideas pushed out there as far as things that we can do to improve these webinar series or get more information out there to you, please let us know anytime. Send us an email, send me a phone call. Thank you so much for what you do as a volunteer, and I look forward to working with you throughout this next application cycle. Go Bears!